Hey everybody, I'm Josh Olive with Haven Comics. It's Thursday night, which means it's time for Shop Talk, and we have got a really fun show for you guys tonight with a couple of comics creators that I'm really excited to talk to. They're putting out a book that comes out next week, and I want to ask some questions. I want to get some spoilers, and I want to make sure that you guys know you need to swing by your LCS and pick this book up. So after this. Alan Breedlove to bring on. He's telling me, I see him shaking his head. Something's going on. What's happening, Alan?
So you
Am I
froze up
breaking
for a
up?
second. Yeah, you're freezing up intermittently now. So
I've got
well,
a bad connection. This is great.
that's all right. I mean, it happens. Oh, so while we're kind of waiting to see what's going on with the connection, I do wanted to tell everyone, I love embarrassing my daughter. I love embarrassing my daughter in front of her friends. And if this status bar will hurry up, there will be a new short going live here and say within the next 4 to 5 minutes that you need to watch after the show. And please make this short go viral. It truly needs to go viral. Josh has seen it. Josh knows how bad it is, how funny it is. Yeah, just get
I
ready.
saw a preview of it. It was not what I was expecting. Yeah,
So that's
that short
weird.
was
It's like,
not what I was expecting. I
well, the person that filmed the short wasn't expecting it either. That's what makes it even better.
well, that does make it a bit of a surprise. That's for sure. Other than your last ridiculous short, you did.
Okay, so once again, Josh is freezing up intermittently.
No.
He's actually, oh, we can see the face now.
Well, I tell you what,
Tell you
Alan.
what we'll do.
I'm gonna try a full system reboot to see what's going on. If you would introduce our guest, and then we have another guest who will be joining us shortly. I'll be out no, however long it takes for this to boot back up. But I trust you. Be a good guy, make good decisions, and don't treat Nick badly. You can treat Nick Ellis badly. Don't treat Nick Marinkovich badly.
We'll see.
All right, I'll be back shortly.
So as soon as Josh, all right, so Josh has completely disappeared. It's just us now. What we're going to go ahead and do is we will go ahead and bring on Nick. We will add him to the screen, and we will let everybody get their sneak peek at one of the creators of Image Comics' new book, Dead Romans. Nick, how you doing tonight?
Hey, Alan. Thank you for having me.
Sounds like everybody's excited to hear from you. That's always good. So, as you can tell, this is definitely not one of our typical shows. One of the things that we like to do on the show is we always start out and try to find out a little bit about the creator by having the creator tell us. So, Nick, tell us what drew you into comics and how you got started.
Loaded question here. I think I probably have a very similar story like all of us who stuck with it all these years. You know, I was, I had an older brother who I used to rummage through his collection and probably manhandled a ton of really valuable comics that he's probably ruining to this day. But I loved it, you know? And I never really thought about doing it professionally, you know, it was just something I love going to comic book stores. I think one of the series I always followed when I was a little kid was, you know, X-Men, starting around, I think Dark Phoenix saga, you know, followed that right through until probably around the Mark Silvestri run, you know, and I love that run too. I really loved Mark Silvestri. And then at that point I went to school, and then you kind of forget about it. I mean, when I say school, I mean college, you know. You forget about it for a while just because there's no comic shops around you. But it's one of those things where every time you would walk by one, you know, I had to go in there, you know. I had to get back into my thing. And then when I finished school, I was back home, unemployed. And an old buddy of mine who we used to draw together when we were little kids, he was like, "Hey man, there's a show coming up in Toronto. You want to go, you know, do a few sample pages like we used to, see if we can get published?" And that was it. You know, we did like 5 sample pages. We did, geez, you know, I can't remember the character's name. It was a Marvel character. Son of Satan. Do you remember?
Oh yeah.
Damien. What was his name?
I don't remember. I mainly remember the covers of that book because I never really read it, but I definitely know the character.
Same. And, you know, to be perfectly honest, I barely knew the character. My buddy was like really into it. And we just wanted something that no one else was doing, you know? We went to that show, and Yannick Paquette was there. This was before he like blew up, you know, as being, you know, big A-lister. But he was great to chat with, you know, gave us a lot of advice. And he took those pages, and within like, you know, 3 months, we got a call from Sony Pictures saying, well, it was IDW who licensed the Underworld project through Sony Pictures. And they were like, "Hey, do you guys, you know, we saw these pages. Would you guys like to handle the adaptation for this film?" And, you know, I had never done a book before. So I just kind of bullshitted my way. And I was like, yeah, we'll do it. And then, you know, that day I went out, I got my first graphics tablet, learned on the job. And, you know, that film adaptation came out like 2 months later. Well, I mean, I don't know. Whenever. But
Which film was it?
It was Underworld.
Oh, really?
The one with like Kate Beckinsale and the vampire werewolf flick.
Yeah, definitely know that movie. Did not know we was having royalty on tonight. I mean, I love that movie. That was a great movie.
That was my first thing. You know, I didn't know the movie. You know, it was old school back then. Like, you know, they would send us production shots, and we had to mimic the character. Like, they were very stipulating that we had to, all the main actors, we had to make sure we got their likenesses correct. And we had to send in, like, you know, this is before internet, you know, we're like sending him through the mail. And that's how she went. You know, after that, we followed it up with a mini series. And, you know, you just kind of fall into it. You know, at the time, I didn't know if this was going to be a thing. I remember my first show back then, I got invited to, and you walk in there, and I totally felt like, you know, that imposter syndrome, as they call it. You know, you're around all these other guys, and you think, oh, these guys are established. You know, who am I? I'm like a nobody, you know. But the funny thing is like, to this day, people ask me about that book all the time. You know, so it really rang the bell with a lot of people, and that was my first start.
Wow, talk about getting thrown into the deep end for your first time.
Right on. And
so,
you know, if I'm being honest, I don't even know. Had it not come so easily at the beginning, I don't even know if I would have had the, you know, the determination to keep up with it. But that's how it went for me, and it worked out. You know.
All right, so we will, in the backstage area, we now have Fred Kennedy. We're going to go ahead and bring him on.
Oh, there he is.
Now we have Fred Kennedy, the writer of Dead Romans, and Nick Marinkovich, the artist for Dead Romans. So Fred, you're kind of expecting Josh to be on here too. Josh is having technical difficulties.
It happens, man.
Well, the thing about it is, Josh only knows Microsoft Office. So, you know, that's about it. And I'm going to give him a hard time for that. So, but basically what we do is when we do this, and you're kind of, we're just going to, I guess, pull back the curtain and tell everybody what we kind of tell folks backstage.
You just let me go, boss.
We'll just let them see how the sausage is made. If they decide not to tune back in, oh well, they're lost. So what we'll do is we've already asked Nick, and one of the things that we like to do is like to find out about the creator that we have on. So Nick was just telling us how he had gotten started in the comic book industry. So now it's your turn. How did you get started into the industry, and what actually drew you into it?
First of all, I love how Nick is like drinking wine and he has his really slick setup, and I've got just garbage behind me. It's amazing. It's so good. This is the dynamic. So I got started in comics just when we moved to Canada. There was I read like comics before we moved to Canada, but they're like, European comics and stuff like that, like Asterix and Lucky Luke, I guess is what it's called here, and things like that. And then when we moved to Edmonton, there was a 7-Eleven by our house with a spinner rack, and I would put my quarter on the Street Fighter 2 machine and just wait for my turn to play Street Fighter. Exactly. Champion Edition, if anyone was curious.
The only way to go.
I literally did that with the Max Milk down the street from me.
Yeah.
They had a comic rack and Street Fighter 2. And
Yep, it was the Circle
universe.
K.
Yeah.
Yep, Circle K for me, right down the road from the house.
Yeah, so that's where I got like really into reading superhero comics and whatnot. And then once it was weird because I got into broadcasting, and then when you're in broadcasting, you're going from small town to small town to small town. You go to where the work is, you make no money, you're broke all the time. And I didn't read anything at all. And then I got back into comics when I was in Edmonton, and I was in my early 20s. And there was a really great shop that doesn't exist anymore called Happy Harbor. And they were doing this free comic book day. And I went there and I snagged a few books there. And then I started reading them. And then one of my friends, I found out, went there also. And they're like, have you ever done 24-hour comic book day? And it was the 24-hour comic book day challenge that really got me writing a comic for the first time. And then when I was in Toronto, I met Adam Gorham, who's doing the Darth Vader book right now. And we met because he had an indie book that he was doing called The Vampire Conspiracies, which I won't show you because he'll get really mad about it. But he did
We
this.
don't have to tell him. Just go ahead and show it.
Yeah.
We'll keep it amongst ourselves.
When I get off camera, I'll go grab it. And he's being choked. But that was his first book. And he messaged me when I was on the radio asking if I would promote it. And I was like, I will. But you got to do a book with me. And we started doing this indie book called Teuton. And it was when I did this book with him. And I didn't just like make him do it to talk about his book. I paid him. I'm not a jerk. So I paid him because he's an artist. I paid him. Everyone gets paid. We're all professionals. So we did this book called Teuton.
I see Nick shaking his head like, wait, where's my money?
No, I'm paid up.
I was told I was going to get some exposure.
No, he's actually been good about it.
So I did that book with Adam, and we would do because we're both working jobs and then doing comics for a hobby. We would do one trade a year.
He'll never see the show. Just show us the book.
Okay, hold on a second. Hold on.
I've never seen this yet either, so this is new for me too.
So this is educational. This is good for everyone.
Yeah. Now, Nick, you're going to find out quick that I'm always going for the exclusive, and I will have a sales pitch for both of y'all later on in the show.
That was Adam Gorham's very first book right there.
Nice.
Now you've seen it. Yeah, so we did this book called Teuton, and that was like a 3-year project, and it was really doing that really taught me a lot about writing long format and incorporating episodic story beats and stuff like that, because we were pitching it while we were doing it sort of as a let's learn as we go. And I really believe that a lot of the lessons I learned through doing that book really got me to where I am today. Absolutely.
So now, okay, since we both kind of got both y'all's backstory a little bit, how did y'all end up hooking up together to work on Dead Romans?
Nick, you tell. I told the story all the time.
Yeah, I had just released this book called The Voyager. It was another historical epic, and we were at a comic show together, and Fred came up to me and just to get it signed, and he was like, "Hey, I think you actually asked me for a commission for a piece, and then I started following you on Facebook, and I was like, oh, this guy's pretty funny. I find him intriguing. And then out of the blue, he messaged me, and he's just like, hey, are you interested in doing a pitch? And honestly, like my first thing is, oh man, another pitch, you know? But the funny thing is the subject matter, and this is true. He pitched me about this Roman, Roman context, right? At that time, I was actually listening to this podcast by this guy, Mike Duncan, called The History of Rome. And I was thinking to myself,
that is a great podcast.
Are you familiar with it? Right.
Oh my God.
Okay.
That is a great podcast. And if you haven't listened to
awesome,
David
right?
Crowther's History of England, that is phenomenal.
Nice. So I'm in this, and I remember listening to the parts about the the Punic Wars with Hannibal, and I was thinking like, oh man, this would make an awesome story someday. Like I wonder if I could like visualize this. And then this guy out of the blue, messages me saying, hey man, would you want to do something about like set in Rome about the Varian disaster? And I'm like, and the Varian disaster, I know that one. And then about the Teutoburg Forest. And I just thought, I'm a sucker for these things. I thought, okay, there's something to this. This is not a coincidence.
This was fate.
This is fate. Exactly.
Meant to be.
So I heard him out, and I was just like, you know what? I can either keep dreaming that I'm going to write something someday, or I have this guy giving me this great story right now, and let's make something happen. And here we are.
Well, those aren't mutually exclusive, right? I mean, you can still write something awesome.
Someday.
Nothing's stopping you.
Someday. But it's like you don't want to just limit yourself by something that you can't do in the immediate. Mm-hmm. And it's like, if it's there and this guy can do it better than you can, well, listen to him.
Go on, he says. Go on,
please. The thing is so I met Nick at the show, and then I think I asked him for a commission, but you were like busy. You're very like, you gave me the soft no, and then I was like, okay, cool. And so I didn't push it at all. So I walked away, and then I was talking to Kalman Andrzejowski. Actually was like, he's the guy you need to do this story. He is your guy. And I was like, I will talk to him. I promise. I will go after it again. So then when I messaged him, we went out for drinks. And what was funny, and I remember this, is we got so into talking about the story when we were having drinks at Say What? We were crushing beers. We were having a great conversation. We didn't even get to the money. We didn't even talk about the money. And then at the end, I was like, oh, how much do you want? Spits out the number. There we go. And I was like, okay, good. We're done. Let's go. We're going full steam ahead. So then that's how
I could have asked for more.
Yeah, you could have. I was sold. You romanced me. I was ready to go.
Yeah, you are.
No, don't you just hate when you lowball yourself?
That's a story of my life, man.
So when you're working on a book like this, how important is it to do like historical research and make things historically accurate versus just wanting to give completely over to fantasy and just meld the two? I mean, do you try to find a fine line, or is it we're going to get enough historical accuracy to let our story kind of blend in like it really could happen? I mean, how do you actually meld the two?
For myself, and I think Fred is on the same page, as it were. It's hugely important. I did an immense deep dive into this because that's the way I wanted to do it, and I mean, Fred was on the, he wanted it as well. And I get, really OCD about this kind of stuff. It's gotta I don't want to just throw stuff out there. You're looking at Roman history. We're talking about 1,000 years, right? And it's so naive to just say, oh, well, this is how Romans looked. No, how different do things change in a small period of time, So I tried to get as close as possible to that time period Fred was talking about, and just did this, crazy, I fell down this rabbit hole, on Google looking for any kind of reference, looking up any kind of movie, any kind of
the gates. You sent me that diagram the other day about the gate layouts and the different types of gate layouts they would do in camps. That's how like ridiculously into the minutia we were getting.
It is like
That's awesome though. It grounds it. It makes it feel real. You know, and then there are things that as readers you don't know, like your brain does. You may not know the information that's legitimate, but the back of your mind goes, okay, that works.
Yeah,
I get that. So it plays across the way that you read and consume, even without your conscious mind being aware of some of that stuff. Whereas on the other hand, if it doesn't feel authentic, that jumps out at you.
Right. And in my opinion, at least, I think you have to just start there as a baseline and then exaggerate from there rather than just, making shit up, because when you do it like that, then it looks awesome. Like if you look at the way I drew the armor on a lot of the characters, it is exaggerated. It's not exactly the way it would have looked, but like the baseline is there. That is the structure of how it would have looked, and mind you, we had a lot of great stuff to fall back on, like not the least of which was HBO's Rome, which was, as good as it gets.
I have been going back and rewatching that because ever since we saw the solicitation for Dead Romans,
mm-hmm.
I've just been wanting all this stuff. So I'm in the middle of rewatching Rome right now,
mm-hmm.
And it's all y'all's fault. I blame the two of you.
Yeah,
well,
but it's
welcome.
awesome, right? Like,
it's fantastic.
It is, right?
The one thing
and when you read that it was supposed to be, like what was it supposed to be 4 or 5 year series,
mm-hmm.
and then they just had to like truncate it into 2 years, like it just rips your heart out.
The one thing that I was really adamant about was that we couldn't make anything up in the sense that we could add something, but things that were added had to line up with the timeline and the logistics of where characters were coming from.
So nobody's showing up with an AK-47.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, so let's take a look at Gaius Quintilius Varus. That's the Roman governor. So we're going to add some characters that are in his household. Where has he been in his life? Where has he served? What legions did he have with him at those times? Were those legions in Teutoburg? All of those things and backgrounds and little details play a huge role in the story. So you've got a character, and she is Syrian. So she's from Syria. At the time, Syria was Roman. But when the Romans came in, Syria was Greek. So she was born in Greek Syria. So when she swears, she's swearing to Hellenic gods, not Romanic gods. And tiny little details like that make or break me on everything. I get very weird about little details like that. And the one thing that I was really, I was explaining how I could do, like, I would love to do like a comic book that's just the history of all the little minutia that actually happened during the course of that battle, all of the military infrastructure that the Germanic tribes built along the roads in the Teutoburg, where the tribes came from, because I'm so obsessed with all of it. I think there's one that we're getting to a bunch of stuff that were placed fortifications that I could go on and on and on about for hours, and the intertribal relationships and the blood feuds. And that was the hardest part, was cutting out all the research. But without all of that research being there, the stuff that's built on top of it just would not work. And I think that the subtle, grounded nature of the story really shines through better because of all of the research that both Nick and I did. I could show screenshots of back and forth conversations about camp layouts, like and wall structures. Like, those are all the things that matter, those are huge factors in the story.
Yeah. I pepper him with questions. I'm like, comic book guy, messaging him about all these little details. I'm sure it drives him nuts. I'm sure
love
he's being nice right now.
My favorite thing. It's my favorite because, like, it gives me a distraction from reality. It's so great.
And I say, as a reader, I like hearing stuff like this from the creators, just simply because it actually tells me how much y'all enjoy it and how much y'all love what you're doing.
Makes
me want to read it even more.
We're just waiting for the opportunity to, like, try and get our second arc. That's like been a big theme of our conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's hope
I
that
think it'll
first issue
happen.
does
Yeah.
really good. Yeah. What's gonna happen?
You said your
Because
second
it
arc.
it
is
all
all
fits,
fighting-
guys. Like, you know, when Fred told me like the way he envisioned it ending, I'm like, oh, we got to fucking do that, man. Like,
Yeah.
you know.
Now, you say the second arc. Have y'all already finished this arc? I mean, are y'all just kind of waiting on everything to come out now, or what's
We're
going on?
waiting. Yeah, we're waiting for stuff to come out right now. It's all
Yeah.
like mapped out, plotted, and written. I'm talking about the second arc is all mapped out and plotted.
Gotcha.
It's not scripted, but the story, if you know anything about the Battle of Teutoburg Forest and the repercussions that came along afterwards,
It was a happy ending for everyone.
yeah. And everyone else's happy ending was a bad ending for everybody else involved. So everybody gets a whole lot of comeuppance. It's pretty dope.
Oh, just to interject, Josh, at the beginning, you mentioned the book is coming out next week. It's actually out now.
Now,
It just came out yesterday.
it was initially supposed to be on the 29th, though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Was,
it
but
wasn't. Yes.
you're not wrong. The original date was the 29th, but it got bumped ahead, and so we came out yesterday. It's
Well,
doing really good.
I want to take a second to one of the reasons that I said that, because it was fresh in my mind, was because of this book, because of Dead Romans. I wanted to talk to you guys, and so I reached out to the one person I knew that knew you guys, and that was Jim Valentino at Image.
Yeah.
And he was like, let me see if they're interested in talking to you. And I'm like, well, don't do that, because they won't want to do it.
No.
Just tell them that they should, and maybe they will.
Yeah.
Because of you guys, he is coming on the show next week.
Yeah.
Nice.
And he said in his email yesterday, he said, well, that's a big announcement for everybody who didn't know. We have Jim Valentino, co-founder of Image, coming on the show next week. That's going to be awesome. But he said, well, that's the day after Dead Romans comes out. That's perfect. And I was like, yes, it is perfect.
We just found out, like, it was like a month ago. We found it was pretty tight when it moved forward, but we were super stoked to just have the book out in the wild and get it into people's hands. My mom is very excited about it. She's really happy. Yeah.
How many copies did she pre-order at her LCS?
Well, she went to the shop that I used to buy comics at when I stepped up and started going to an actual comic shop. She bought like 4 copies. She bought the A, B, C, and D from that shop. And she's like, when I went in, they only had like 1 or 2 left. So I bought those also, and I'm giving them to my friends. I'm like, great. Now no one can read it. Awesome. Like, it's super cool.
Mom.
Yeah. When I saw the covers for it, I saw that B cover. And the first thing that went through my mind was, oh, baby, you're coming home to daddy. And then the second thing that went through my mind was, son of a bitch, I just jinxed myself. That'll be the one cover that sells out across the nation.
Yeah.
And I will never get my hands on it. I love that, because that cover is gorgeous.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I agree, Nick. It's great.
That to give you a little background, that is actually, it's almost like a little preview of Arminius. At the end, you're not going to see him like that until literally the last page of issue 5, which I'm working on now. You know,
you guys are doing it right. You're well ahead of the game, and that's where you should be.
Yeah. But you don't see him in his full Germanic regalia until that point. Before then, he's, without giving out too many spoilers, he's in full Roman gear. He's a good old Roman helping out, and but little do we know, he's the instigator of all this.
So for those of you that have not seen the B cover, this is the B cover that we're talking about. And, I know how you jerks are at Haven. Y'all all rush up there tonight, beat down the doors, and buy it before I can, because it's not the first time y'all have done that to me. Y'all know who you are.
I'm stoked for the covers from issue 2. Like, I love all the covers. But the issue 4, I think, with the covers for issue 4, which I think maybe in solicits right now or very, very soon.
I know number 3 was. We just put. So number 4 should be in the previews that drops this week. So
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not showing number 4 here. I go to League of Comic Geeks because it's extremely easy to navigate, and since they're website's a little bit darker, it shows up better here. So, and
So
they don't have core listed yet.
So I have a question on this. You've got this idea percolating. This it's a historical era you clearly like. It's a popular one, and for good reason, because it covers such a broad swath of human history, and there's so much happened. The rise and the fall. There were many rises and falls, right? It wasn't just one.
Oh yeah.
But it was the slow degradation over time from this incredible empire that still the roads that they built are still in good working order in places in the world. It's insane. This is 2,000 years ago. Aqueducts they built still in good working order. Their engineering was insane. So I get the introduction or the interest in the time period. I get all that stuff and I love it. But how did you zero in on Teutoburg Forest as what you really want? Like, there's a story in here I want to tell. How did you guys zero in on that?
Whenever you read about like Roman history, there's always like some real big like lightning points, like the Battle of Cannae when you're talking about Hannibal, and you brought that up earlier. That's like a big one. And then Belisarius, the last Roman general, and there's always these like lightning rod moments for the empire that everyone is really interested in for different reasons, and it's like a completely different empire in those given times. But the Battle of Teutoburg Forest is, I think, probably the most horrific. Like the Battle of Cannae, if anybody knows about the Battle of Cannae, it must have been one of the most horrible things to experience, because you've got an entire army that is surrounded and it's just a meat grinder, and everyone in the middle knows eventually they're going to get massacred because all the soldiers are in the middle and it just closes around them. It must have been terrifying, but that was just a few hours. And that's not me trying to lessen the experience, but it's just a few hours. The Battle of Teutoburg Forest is more Romans dying over a 4-day period in a swamp with rain. It is, and as you're imagining, you're in a marching column that's like 20 kilometers long. You don't know what's going on at the front. They get attacked. All of a sudden you stop, but you don't know what's happening. And then all of a sudden you see this wave of battle coming at you. You try and hide. You're hiding in this like rain-drenched bog, and all around you, you can hear people hunting you. You can hear the screams of people being literally sacrificed alive. It is one of the most terrifying, horrible types of scenarios that I could possibly imagine. And it really does have like the swamp and the forest and the darkness does play a role in it. And I thought that's perfect to put a love story in. You know, that's the perfect love story setting. And so
what else would inspire romance?
Exactly. Well,
the scent of a bog and death.
That's the thing is like, I think that polar opposites go great together. That you've got these two people that are just desperate to find one another in the most horribly terrifying experience that you could possibly put anyone in. And that drives people to extremes. And I think that a movie that one of my friends compared it to was 28 Days Later, when Cillian Murphy breaks through the window, and it's on, but he's doing it to save her. Like, it's the most overcharged kind of scene you can imagine. And there's that moment where she's got to look at him to like realize what he is. It's like those raw primal emotions really pop out of the page. And Nick did an amazing job of not losing the story to the violence. And that was the hardest part about finding the right artist. And so that's the story I wanted to tell. And then seeing Nick's art and the way he plays with inks and negative space and all that, I was like, that's it. That's what I need. And so, yeah, like the story really solidified itself once Nick was on board, because I knew that we could pull it off as a team. And that's always the most stressful part, because you can write a great story. Everybody can write a really good story. But if the artist, because I'm telling the story to the artist is telling the story to the reader. And if I'm telling it to him and the telephone line is broken, then it's just not going to come out in the book. And I'm very, very grateful to have the team that I had that put this book together. So, yeah, I rambled and I'm sorry.
So you're saying that, Nick, you didn't just go crazy with random beheadings and disembowelments?
Well, yeah, that's there too.
I was new. It was nuanced. Very, very.
It was subtle. It was subtle.
So
You just
Nick,
have to look in the background.
okay, so Nick, this is just between you and I. We can go ahead and cut Josh and Fred out of this. So since you're adding all these little nuances, this is my idea. What's truly going to make this book complete is if you've got like this little bald fat guy tending his desert garden, and let's just say he happens to go by the name Alan. That's okay too.
His desert garden in the bog. Okay.
Yeah,
Alanius.
he's tending his dead garden, and at one point he turns and looks to the marching Romans and screams, "Get off my lawn, you dead Roman!"
Yeah.
That's going to make the book. I mean, it's going over the top then.
Yeah.
It'll
In
be all the
next panel,
talk.
Can someone stab him, please?
Yeah.
Hey, I did offer to be a murder victim, and Kyle didn't know one.
Yeah.
What's
You
the
did.
significance of this one panel here?
Yeah.
Who is
What's-
this guy?
It's
That-
vernacular. Everyone can
And
relate
that's
to
the
that.
beauty of it. That could be like the next conspiracy theory.
Yeah. Yeah.
This one guy keeps showing up in all these books and getting murdered,
Yeah.
telling people to get off his lawn, and then he gets murdered. Yeah, that
I
would
want
actually
to
be pretty
be-
funny.
I want to be the Stan Lee cameo of independent comics. That's what I want. I'm not asking for much. Just throw me in your story somewhere.
I'm doing the second arc. I told you I haven't scripted the second arc, and if you hadn't excluded me from this conversation, I could have made it happen.
Well,
Oh,
I wanted to get the artist to sneak it in, just in the background somewhere.
like a Sergio Aragonis thing in the corner in a Mad magazine. Just it's in there. I get it. I get it.
Jeff Discaro was just going to hide something in the background somewhere.
Mm.
You know,
Never find it.
Incidentally, we think about stuff like this, and I'll say, "Hey, Fred, man, wouldn't it be awesome if we did this?"
You
And
tell me about the hot dog thing.
yeah, the hot dog thing.
Yeah.
There's a
Okay,
hot
look,
dog thing, which would be
You
the
can't
funniest
do
thing.
that to me. You got to
I
tell me
gotta
the hot
know.
dog thing now.
Well, I mean, but there's no
We
context.
we can't because it's like a really important scene, and we don't want to give anything away.
Yeah.
But there was almost some hot dogs in there, or maybe there is. I don't know. You'll have to wait and see.
No,
Is
no,
that why
I-
the Romans are dead? They choked on hot dogs?
That could be. That could be. That ended the empire. The hot dog.
What are you carrying into battle? An 8-pack of all beef dogs.
Yeah.
No,
It is
the
ridiculous.
Germans
Like I
came
said
down
here, I think about this crap, and I'm like laughing to myself like a total douchebag, and I'm like typing to Fred.
See, it's the
But,
Germans who came down and introduced them all to bratwurst, is what it was, right? They're like, aha, this ought to finish them off. Their cholesterol is going to go through the roof. So, question for you, Nick, because I've looked, I did a little bit of stalking before the show, and I found a DeviantArt page that I believe belongs to you.
Oh yeah, I haven't updated that in ages, but it's there. Yeah, I think I haven't updated that in like 5 years, but it's there.
What there's a Roman legionary on there.
Oh, okay, that one. I think I'm exaggerating. It wasn't 5 years because when I did the cover, I threw that on there. Oh, and I think there's some concept art from like Regulus.
I believe there was, yes.
Yeah.
Dude, because having gotten some exposure and kind of flipping through some of the stuff that you've got there, I see what made Nick or what made Fred go, yeah, gee, I want this guy to do this book. This is phenomenal. Man, you are a talented man.
Well, thank you.
And see,
Thank you.
people can commission you if you're not giving them a soft no and telling them to get the heck out of your face at conventions like you did to Fred. But see, Fred, do people commission writers? See, it's a hard life, isn't it?
No one's ever like, hey, can you write me a poem or a sonnet? Like, no one's doing that at all, man.
See, they should do that.
Yeah, like although I
it'd be
host a lot
harder
of
at
sketch
cons.
duels at shows, like I'll host a lot of sketch duels when I'm at the cons in Toronto, and sometimes I'll get like pestered by the artists to do drawings and compete with it. And there was one time I beat Mike Walsh at a sketch duel, and I had drawn like they drew like great pieces of art, and I drew like a stick man fighting Bigfoot holding a bag of money, and I won, baby. I won. It was great. Although this was like years ago. So,
See, now I need a comic book with Bigfoot robbing banks and running around bags of money. So I jumped over to Image's site, and this right here is what's popped up, and I wanted to give everybody a chance to see the art some. Oh, she's pretty. That's for sure.
That's actually the first time you see Regulus in the book. You won't see him again until the next issue. But he's a really rad character. The dude right at the front is one of my favorites. And his
This one right
back,
here is Regulus.
yeah, his name is Regulus, and he's a pretty dope character. He was one of my favorites to create and write and stuff like that. So
Okay, so who's the guy with the lion's head on top of his head? I'm kind of digging that.
So that guy, that's actually not a critical character. He's called an aquilifer. Aquila meaning eagle in Roman, and they would be the main standard bearers of the column. And I mean, they were critical. Like, they would be paid more than the standard soldier, and their job was to basically carry the standard, even in the thick of battle. And I just thought it was like, I thought it was a necessary detail.
It's great because it like imposes that like Roman pomp, you know what I mean? The golden eagles, like, that was a big deal, is that the 3 eagles of the legions went missing, and they went back in to find them. And for the Roman tribesmen, like, there's been a lot of movies. I think there is a movie called The Eagle with Channing Tatum.
Of all people, Channing Tatum.
Yeah, and then there's,
you know what? Like, I know, we kind of laugh at Channing Tatum, but that was actually a decent movie.
It wasn't a bad movie at all. But I'm a sucker for anything to do with, like, Rome. You know what I mean?
I just had a hard time buying him in the role. I liked the concept of the movie. I liked everything about it, except he didn't feel right for that part.
Yeah, what's funny is when I went in, it was what's his face, the dude who played the Celtic tribesman, who I didn't. It's not Ben Foster, but the guy with the ears. I was like, he's not going to be able to pull it off, but he was great in that role. He was fantastic in his role. He pulled it off for sure. And I thought he was
partner.
His little partner in crime guy.
Yeah, he's a great actor. Again, his name is not coming to me at the moment.
Let me address this real quick. Aaron, this is a comic created by the 2 gentlemen we have on the show with us tonight, Fred Kennedy and Nick Marinkovich. This is Dead Romans, and I know that you need this book. If anybody I ever met in my life needed this book, it's you. She's a bit of a scholar, and she speaks like 5 languages or something. It's ridiculous, but translates a lot of old. So if you guys ever need anything translated from Latin, she would be a great resource for you.
You know why she'd appreciate it the most is because the Battle of Teutoburg Forest is responsible for the language line in Europe between Germanic and Romanic languages. And that line of the Teutoburg Forest, like, once Rome was driven out after Teutoburg, they didn't go back. Well, we'll see in the second arc, but they didn't go back and colonize Rome again, colonize Germania again. Because of that, you've got the language divide, because initially at that time, all the Gallic tribes in France and in northern Spain, they were all speaking like Gallic languages and Germanic based languages. But once Rome came in, that's it. And that's why you still have that language divide right there. It's because of what happened in the fall of 09 AD in Teutoburg Forest. Yeah. So in terms of significance, it's profound. And I think somebody with an understanding of languages will appreciate that. And what I'm really excited about is for someone with like a lot of education in history to call me out and point out all my mistakes so that I can learn to be better next time.
Don't challenge her to that, please.
Do it. No, do it. Not in the sense like challenge me. Like, no, teach me is what I'm saying. I want to learn and get better is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, she'll be happy to do that.
I did want to say this right quick. Nick, I ran across this one earlier on Image's website. I fell in love with this. This is absolutely gorgeous. The first thing I thought when I saw this picture was, I need this as a poster. I need some type of print of this. Y'all, I mean, if you want to push down that line, I know you'll at least get one order for it.
No, in fact, you want to know something? Jim Valentino said that's like one of his favorite pages in the book.
It's so moody.
And that was, I think, the first page I actually colored in the series. And, I really wanted to wow Fred because he'd seen, just the ink work up at that point. And I was just like, hey, I'm going to blow this guy's socks off. And I sent that to him. And I think he liked it.
Well, that's like the whole story right there. You can't the idea of the micro and the macro. And I've said this in interviews before. It's like you can look at this story and symbolically you can figure out everything that's going to happen in the story, because you've got the Roman infantry line coming down to the bottom right of the page there, and then the auxilia in the front watching them come and waiting for them, because you'll see what the Roman auxilia are going to wind up doing as the story goes along. And they're lost in this storming, swampy forest with the ravens circling overhead and Wotan striking down his lightning bolts from the sky. So it's all there. And I know that sometimes get a little bit artsy and whatnot, but it's true. And I think that a lot of times when you're writing a comic and you're working on a comic, you sort of get lost in the, I've got to push the plot, I've got to do this. And I think that we can forget that it really is a visual medium and it's artistry. And you've got to lean on your artist and trust your readers, because sometimes someone's going to pick that book up and they're going to be like, there it is. It's really all there. And I think that's one of my things I'm most proud of with this book, is that I feel like we've done a very good job of not falling into that urge to just make like a bombastic blockbuster, but to tell something in the way that, like, I always compare like Rome and Spartacus. I like both Rome and Spartacus, but for very different reasons. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to do another Spartacus. I wanted to do something that was like Rome, that had the punch and power of Spartacus when the action flew. Because when he crossed the Rubicon in Rome and they just have like the flag, I was like, I am let down. Like, I want to see that. But like, because you open with that big battle against the Gallic tribes, and I don't know what battle they're trying to recreate, or just some generic
I think it's
counter.
Just generic one, yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like, that was so cool with the whistle, blowing of the whistle, and they shuffle down the line, which are things that they did. And I think we had a conversation once about like whether there should be whistles in the big final encounter of the story, because there were a bunch of whistles found, and there's a big argument. Oh, look at that. I don't even know what that means, but cool. But there was an argument about whether the whistles were used in battle or whether the whistles were just used to keep marching order. But there will be whistles.
But are you guys familiar with the scene that Fred is talking about in Rome?
Yes.
It's like right at the beginning, you know? Yes. And I think that's one of the only scenes I've ever seen in popular cinema where you're actually seeing a legitimate, Roman fighting style, where it's a line and they're like shifting position, because even in like a big blockbuster like Gladiator, sure, I mean, it starts off great, but as soon as the fight starts, it just becomes your Braveheart type melee,
Yeah.
They all completely lose formation, which would never have happened, So I really dug the fact that in Rome, I'm like, oh, wow, they're showing us what it was like, and I don't know why that's not shown more. Like, I don't know, do people consider that boring or what? Because I'm all over that kind of stuff, man.
Well, that's because everybody on this show is a nerd, right? We get into the details, that we like that stuff, and a lot of people they just want to see the blood and the super fast camera cuts like Jason Bourne, which drives me insane. Like, can we not film a fight scene anymore, guys? But no, the scene you're talking about from Rome is exactly right. It's a great picture of how the Roman military worked and why it was so successful. It was very difficult to challenge. And they do kind of carry that through in a few other episodes too. I guess right before the episode where Brutus dies, I think.
Yes.
They Tetsudo and all this, and you see some of the things that they do. But yeah, it's I really appreciate that element of things in the show.
He called you a nerd, Tots. A nerd.
Tots, if anybody on here is a nerd, you're like one of the king of the nerds.
One of the things that, like, in Dead Romans that I thought we really leaned on hard was consistently the Arminius's character is having to pull the leash on the tribal leadership who want to just, like, we got them on their heels, let's go in and get them. And he goes, you don't get it. Like, you don't ever fight them on their terms. Like, you don't ever go where they are. You make them come to us, and then we attack. And there's so many times where he's consistently had me like, you got to listen to me. Like, I know what I'm doing because I was with them for years. And it's those are the things that I'm the most proud of, the little interplay between the Arminius character and the characters around him.
You know, it always makes me wonder of like the kind of charisma he would have in reality had to have had, you know, because you're dealing with these other chieftains who are like, with this warrior culture, and these are big badass dudes, right? And like for them to actually listen to a guy like you had to be, you had to have this kind of like real power behind you to really convince them of like, this is how it's going to work. This is what will work, because, there's a lot of, penises wagging around and stuff like that,
Yeah.
Did you draw a lot of that?
I draw some of that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Because this was actually, we had
not like Corbin amount of penises, but it's there. Yeah. It's implied.
Well, we had this. There's a thing about the Germanic berserkers. They used to take magic mushrooms and it caused priapism. So they're fully at attention, And so you've got this.
That's how I like to run into battle.
Exactly. So think about this. So we got like this, like all these berserkers that are all just juiced up, at attention, charging out of the forest, buck naked, covered in war paint, wielding axes and spears, running across a field at you. That's a terrifying image. And Jim actually had to write Eric about that to see if we were allowed to show that in the book. We're allowed, just so everyone knows.
You're saying that the Comics Code Authority did not approve this book?
No, history is not approved by the Comics Code Authority, man.
Yeah, don't worry. It would have only got pulled if it had been DC Black.
Yeah, we're good.
Black
we're
label,
good. Yeah.
Even that cover you guys showed earlier, that's for issue 3 with the barbarian. His name was Gannicus on the front. Mm-hmm. And I even originally he was like full spread, his arms are to the side. And I just couldn't, I was like, okay, no, man, you got to cover that. So I shifted his arm, in front of his junk with the big axe. But it still it looks awesome. But
he's terrifying.
Yeah.
We actually had a big discussion with Allison, our editor, and I were sitting next to each other at a con over the weekend. And we were having discussions about Arminius versus Ganascus versus Regulus and who would win. And we determined that Regulus would probably beat everybody, but like Regulus versus Ganascus would be the best fight. Arminius wouldn't have been as good of a one-on-one fight, but he was too smart. He never would have allowed himself to get in that situation to begin with. But yeah, I can't wait for you guys to see what's coming, man. That's what I'm stoked about. Because if you like the first issue, if you like what you've seen, Nick and I have been talking a lot over the past like 2 or 3 days about how it's just going to get better.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you our interest in this was piqued pretty quick. On the show here, we go through previews and we'll just flip through the new previews and see what looks good to us, right? What's exciting that's coming out. And we're flipping through Dead Romans. I'm like, okay, title got me. Concept got me. Holy crap, art got me. I'm 100% in on this book. The solicit was everything I wanted to see. And I know I'm a little bit of a historian nerd and this kind of stuff. So like, all right, maybe I'm alone here, but I don't know. And we're talking and Alan's like, hang on a minute. Let's go back. I want to see this. Let's talk about this. So we start talking about that. And then as we talk through the show, we start getting people like, hey, sign me up for that. Put that on my pull list. I want that book too. That sounds really cool. I'm like, all right, this is something I really want to see. Don't worry, Tots. We will make sure that we get you one.
But not the copy I want.
Right. He may have to steal yours if you got cover B.
Yeah.
But so I had my initial order placed. And then when FOC came around, we started talking about it again. And then I'm like, I better go order some more after that just to be on the safe side. It's just one of those books that looks like it ticks all the boxes for me. Great story, great art, and that's when comics come together with those two elements, you can't beat it. That's fantastic. So we were piqued. Our curiosity was piqued. Our interest was piqued right out of the gate. we were very interested in this. So I don't know if you guys chose how the solicits were put together or any of that stuff, but whoever did that, kudos, because it's awesome.
Yeah, I got to give a big shout out to Allison, our editor, and Jim as well for like being great at making sure all the pieces behind the scenes. Because Nick and I kind of, Nick knows more about the comic book world than I do. I just like to tell stories, but all the logistic stuff is really like Jim and Allison have been the ones that are doing that. So yeah, big shout outs to them.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I can tell you, Jim Valentino does not post a whole lot of comics to his personal Facebook page, but he's posted about this one several times. He is very excited for this book, and it's not a direct quote because I don't remember exactly the words he used, but he said something to the effect of this is one of the most beautiful books he's ever seen.
Yeah.
That's a winner in my book.
You know what? To give some much deserved props to Jim. When you have that kind of support from your publisher, it makes a huge deal on the creative team. It's a huge deal because I've done books where I felt like we were just like a notch on the assembly line, of their releases, and you think like, does anyone even give a fuck if this book comes out? But with Jim, I felt like he really cared about this book, and that made a huge impact on me and on Fred. And I think that reflected on what we were able to produce. So yeah, big ups to him for that,
I really, really hope that the sales numbers bear out the excitement that we have at my shop, and that Jim has. And I hope that the sales numbers bear out. I don't know if you guys have had any insight into the order numbers here thus far, but
I don't know what they mean, so I can get shown the numbers and not understand.
Yeah, we're creative.
A big number, that's probably good.
We don't know these numbers.
Yeah, like we get numbers, and then I'm like, relative to what? I don't know what that means. So yeah, but we've seen some numbers, but I don't understand what the numbers mean. So
without any context, I guess they could be a little weird.
Like it's like I could give you guys the PPM radio broadcast ratings for the Greater Toronto metropolitan area. It would mean nothing. Like it's a similar thing, you know what I mean?
Well,
it's all,
I don't know, because you are a radio guy, right?
Yeah, so I don't understand these numbers that you're giving me, sir. Like it means nothing. Yeah.
So that sounds like me at work. My boss said something one day, and I was like, "Look, the only numbers I calculate are the numbers on my paycheck. So other than that, just go tell somebody that actually cares about that stuff."
Yeah.
So a question going about Arc 2, right? You said earlier it's written but not scripted. And for folks who are coming into comic books who may not know how the process works, what is that process for you? How does this comic come from it's an idea in your head to a fully realized book? There's a lot of steps there. And I guess what you go from your initial idea to you write down some plot stuff, you give that to the artist. I mean, what's the flow there?
So I always write everything out like in a massive jumbling, like sprawling collection of point form nonsense. And I don't write it in a way that it's going to be executed on the page. I'll write everything chronologically, and then I'll jump around like constantly about this is happening here while this is happening here and that's happening there. But the point is to just get everything onto the piece of paper, like everything. Get everything, no matter how silly, no matter how stupid, go into all of the rabbit holes, and then end up with this massive sprawling document that's like 20 plus pages long. And from there, you shave it down, then you shave it down, then you shave it down, then you shave it down until you get like a full on, like actual like pitch. Once I get like that one pager of what is happening, then I will start working on plotting out the actual issues at a time. And once that happens, then it's just, again, it's the same thing. It's like plotting it out, shaving it, plotting it out, shaving it. So but usually, now that I've got Nick in the fold from the get-go, I'm going to send him my nonsense just so that it can be like, if it triggers anything in him visually, it'll make it easier for me to know where I want to go to. But
He looks so excited about that.
Yeah.
Oh, 20 pages, and he's going to boil it all down to one.
Yeah.
Great.
No, but, I think it works both ways though, because the further I got into the series, I thought I was able to represent Fred's voice better than I did at the very beginning. At the very beginning, it's like it's your own ego, and it's like, oh, well, this is going to be a Nick Marinkovich production, and but the more I read into it, it's just like I started to understand Fred's beat structure, and I started following his panel set more than I did at the beginning. I was just like, I'll just do it my way, whatever. He's cool, right? And then I thought, no, like let me do it the way Fred wants to do it, and like right now I just finished issue, or I'm right to the last 2 pages of issue 5, and I think this is the best issue yet, and I think it's like it takes a couple, it takes like 2 or 3 issues before I think you're really symbiotic with your writer, and at this point I think we're I think we're really in tune right now. I do anyway.
I would agree.
You've got a shorthand that you're able to use to work through things with each other. Yeah.
I think we had that before. It just I just feel like I'm representing Fred's voice better than I had before. I mean, sure, you can make stuff look pretty before, but I think I'm getting Fred's voice down better than I did before.
I'm getting the look, guys, from my wife who just opened my office door. So I've got a 5 minute. I can give you like a 5 minute warning. I'm so sorry.
No, dude, that's all cool.
I got to go make sure I like tuck the kids in before they go to bed. That kind
keeping
of thing.
your wife happy is far more important than anything else in your world.
She's my Roman Empire, man. Like I got to make sure that the borders are protected.
That's a smart man. That's a smart man.
When he said she's my Roman Empire, I literally pictured this woman in a nightgown throwing him to a lion.
That's not out of the realm of possibility, man.
It depends on how bad he's ticked her off on a given day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So since you've got 5 minutes, give us literally because personally, I don't go to the comic book store until Fridays just because of my own personal schedule and the way things happen. So I literally have not picked up Dead Romans yet. But for those who have not picked it up, whether they just didn't pick it up or whether they just haven't got to the comic book store yet, give us your complete and total sales pitch of what the story is like, what it's actually about, why they should pick it up, and
how much they will regret it if they don't.
Yeah, and how they'll regret it.
Well, at its core, it is a monumental love story, and it just happens to be set in the most violent, brutal, chaotic defeat that the Roman Empire ever suffered. And if you are a big fan of horror, this is the most primal nature of horror, because this story takes place in a wood that was so dark and so terrible and so oppressive. The Romans were actually scared to go into it because they thought it was filled with evil spirits. And then we see that, as usual, the evil spirits are really just people up to no good. So if you like history, if you like horror, if you like romance, if you just like stories about the real human condition and what people are willing to go through for the people that they care about, then you'll love Dead Romans. It's that simple.
That's a pretty good pitch, man.
Buddy, I've been doing it all weekend on the show full.
That is a pretty good pitch.
So I was next to our editor, and she was like, after people would walk by, she's like, that was pretty good. It's like, you can cut it down a little bit. It's good, though. It's really good. So she's great. It was great to be sitting next to her at the show. Yeah, it was good.
But you know what? Here's the thing. It did not sound rushed. It did not sound like you were forcing it. You were
because we love it.
That was the perfect pitch.
Dude, we love it. And it's easy to sell something that you legitimately love and legitimately believe in. And I know I love this story. And so I'm friends. I'll put this in perspective. I'm buddies with Ed Brisson, and he's got a great story about his first almost at Image. And it's an amazing story because he actually got his rejection from Eric, and Eric said, this isn't your first book. This is your second book. And I felt like that the premise of that line is that your second book is the one that you love. It's the one that you love, not the one that lands. It's the one that you love. And I felt like Dead Romans was always my second book because this is the story that I love. Like it's surreal for me to see it out there right now, to hold it in my hand. It's so beautiful. And I'm so lucky to be working with Nick And if I was drinking more, I'd get emotional. That's why I'm not drinking wine right now, Nick, because I will cry. I will get all weepy on you right now because I'm so stoked to be part of like this team, like Nick, Allison, Jose, and Andrew. We've got a phenomenal crew of creators behind this book, and it's great to be part of it.
Well, I can promise you, we are praying for a volume 2 for that second arc.
When when Jim comes on, ask him about it.
Oh, we will.
Yeah,
We're not shy. We will.
that's our soft pitch to Jim.
It's a soft pitch. It's
I
and
mean,
then we'll get
people
an
are
email from
clamoring
him
for
Nate,
this,
later.
Jim.
Yeah.
I literally just asked you to put me in a comic book, tending a garden and screaming at the main characters.
That's
Do you
not
think
gonna
I'm
happen
going to
if
be
we don't-
scared to ask Jim Valentino if I'm going to get a second story?
That's not going to happen if we don't get that second arc, man.
Oh,
Yeah,
and
it's
consider
almost done with the
just
first
go
one.
ahead and start now. I'll talk him into it next week.
Okay, good. But I gotta run, guys. I am
Congratulations
so sorry.
on the release of this book. It's awesome. We're really excited for it, and can't wait to put it in the hands of a whole lot of people.
Perfect.
So appreciate you coming on, Fred. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See ya.
See ya.
Okay, so Nick, y'all had kind of touched on something here toward the end, and I wanted to ask you about when. So you started in the process of Dead Romans with Fred extremely early in the beginning, and that's not always how it happens with an artist and a writer on some books. You know, how different or how much did it help you in preparing for this book versus, let's say, Image walks in tomorrow and says, okay, we need you to draw Spawn for us, and you just get dumped with Spawn all of a sudden. You know, is there a difference in your process there? I mean, does it help to start at the very beginning with a writer like this and work through the process, or how does that affect you as an artist?
To a degree, yes, but bear in mind, when you're developing the IP from scratch, there's a lot of work that no one sees when you're designing the characters, designing the environments, like really the world. It's world building, right? I always thought about that, and relative to coming onto an established IP where that's all there already, you know, and you can kind of get going right away. And I was even, telling Fred, it's like, I almost think it's harder for the writer with an original IP, those first few issues where you have to really set the tone. You know, there's so much planting of the seeds of what's going to come. And sometimes I think that they have it harder than the artist for those first couple issues, right? Because we get to be flashy right from the get-go, right? I just get to do my thing and make it look awesome. And I think it's my job to make it look awesome so that audience during the setup wants to come back for issue 2, because that's when it gets going. You know, in that regard, I mean, if it's established, man, you can just get, on a roller coaster right from the beginning, right? I think that's that's where the work comes between the artist and writer. Did I make sense, or was I?
Oh no, it makes total sense. The world building is. I do a fair bit of world building for role playing games, just because I love doing it. Right, I like to take an idea and say, what would a world look like where this, right, or where that? How does that affect their technology? How does that affect their customs? What do you do? How does that impact travel? How does it impact battle? All these kinds of things. So I 100% understand that coming in from scratch. I got a blank sheet of paper. I don't have 500 pages of this character in every position that you would ever want, every costume you could ever want. The lore is already there. We know what he looks like. I'm just continuing something that's already been created. So you're starting from scratch with a blank sheet of paper and an idea and going, all right, so that's one of the reasons I think you're probably looking at gate design and encampment layouts. And the thing is, how would they do this? So how do I then translate that into this visual medium that we're telling stories in? And I think part of what kind of came through the conversation between the way you guys have been working for me is it sounds like he's got this idea and he narrows it down to these kind of fundamentals of here's the story that we're telling. And you have to translate that into visuals.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So this first time the story is told is kind of a bare bones version that you translate into visuals, and so you flesh it out, and then he comes back through and writes the script that then goes with it. So it's this kind of circular I would guess an interstitial sort of approach that's going to happen in fits and starts a little bit by nature. But the very first time we see it, it's already been translated at least once as a reader, right? So we're not really seeing the story as it was in his head. We're seeing it the collaboration of your work and his work. And that's one of the things I love about comics is that whole collaborative idea. Because I can tell you from my world building experience, I'll come up with these things and I'll populate this world. I'll build a sandbox, and then what other people do in that sandbox and the way they translate it and they visualize it is totally different. And I could say, well, that's wrong because it's not how I thought of it. But half the time, what they thought of is way better than what I thought of.
Yeah.
It was just a seed that germinated and grew into something really awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, like I'm thinking back to when I was a kid, and I was telling Alan earlier, when I was a kid, I started off, the series I really loved was like the Claremont run on X-Men, you know, circa like Dave Cockrum, straight through to, I stopped around Silvestri just when Jim Lee started getting started. And I can name you all those artists, penciler and inker teams. And the thing is, each one brought their own flavor to it. You know, I mean, it was an established story already, but it all had like, you can just visualize the various segments of that era. You know, they all brought their own flavor to it, you know?
Yeah, John Romita Jr.'s artwork was even pretty good back then.
It really was. It was awesome. Paul Smith, you know, and then it was John Romita. Then Silvestri followed Romita, right? And then you had like Rick Leonardi filling in a few of those, and everyone loved
Rick Leonardi drew an awesome Colossus. His Colossus was fantastic.
He really did.
Right?
And I know exactly what you're talking about because I love those issues.
It's like sometimes an artist hits a character and they have got that character nailed, and his Colossus was spectacular.
Yeah.
Absolutely spectacular. But I'll tell you, as a retailer, one of the things, and it bothers me as a reader, it always did. But as a retailer, it bothers me too, because I see a lot of people, they'll grab a comic and they'll pick it up like, wow, this is incredible. And then they open it and they scan through and they go like, no, and they put it back because the art inside and the art on the cover don't jive. They don't go together at all. And so when I see the art in this book carries through all the promise of the cover, that gets me excited because those covers are eye-catching. Those covers are gorgeous. I love the use of the white background that just really lets you focus front and center on the image that you're showing. So it's not a big cluttered thing going on. It's really clean. I like the use of that. I like the way it pops. But then when I open the book and I scan through it and I see every one of these pages is exactly that same feel, that same style. I didn't get jarred out of what I thought, the mood that was conveyed to me. It didn't suddenly change when I opened the book. That mood carries through. Man, that's a winner for me. And I got to tell you, I became a real big fan of yours really quick.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You know, that cover concept for the first issue with the white background, I don't know if you guys can pick up or if you picked up on it. It was almost an homage to, do you guys remember the Full Metal Jacket poster? And I was just like, okay, that was like a Roman helmet, you know? And then that one worked out so well that I thought, you know what, let's keep to this theme, you know, with the white background. You know, sometimes I put a little bit of light tone, but really it's just a white background with the center image. And I do that for every cover in this series, you know? And
a lot of guys would do that because, and I see this all the time, you get some phenomenal artists, but they never have backgrounds. There's never anything that establishes the world, right? It's just characters talking. It's just images with some black color spatter on the black. And a lot of white covers where they kind of do what you did might convey that I'm really only good at drawing this stuff and the backgrounds bore me and they take too long and I don't want to draw a bunch of trees. And I get that. But what it sells you is you've got the whole package, right? I get all the mood and everything that's conveyed. That one shot that Alan pulled up on the screen with the guy on the horse and this and the trees and the lightning and the rain and the birds, and that wasn't like a Jeff Darrow assault on the eyeballs kind of a background, but it was everything you wanted was there, and it gave it depth, right? And I love that. But the choice of the white covers is particularly good. It pops and it looks fantastic. And I love it. And see, he likes the B cover better. I like the A cover better. Just because
there was something about
I like
that
the imagery.
cover. And you know how it is. You see a particular cover and you just automatically, for whatever reason, gravitate toward that cover. And there was something about it that it kind of reminded me of like the old, maybe it was just the way the helmet was, like the old school Dungeons and Dragons, Conan, like the barbarian stuff that we grew up with in like the late 70s and early 80s. There was something about that drew me to it. But Bill actually has a really good question. Is it more enjoyable to create the sandbox or to jump into one that somebody else has already created?
Oh, that's a great question. Honestly, I don't know if I've jumped into many sandboxes. I did like one Marvel book. It was Fantastic Four and Incredible Hulk. That was years ago. I mean, that was awesome fun. Nice paycheck too. But I think from the very beginning, I've always wanted to do my own thing. That's just something I always felt like, maybe it's my own ego. I wanted to do mine, so it's my, not that I'm adverse to doing it. I'd love to jump onto an established series and just get my own flair out there, my own version of it. But yeah, good question, man. There's no definitive answer to that. It really is your mood at the time.
Yeah, there's certainly appeal both ways, I would guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
We had a guy, do you know Andy Price by any chance?
I don't know.
Comic book artist. He was one of the earlier customers at my shop, and he was a big Batman fan. Always Batman everything, right? And he kind of came down to, I guess I have the opportunity to come in and do some Batman, or I've been asked to be the penciler on My Little Pony. And I'm like, he's the biggest Batman fan in the world, and he took My Little Pony. And I'm like, why would you do that? And he said, well, you draw Batman. Everybody is always saying, well, I prefer Jim Aparo. I prefer Neil Adams. I prefer Norm Brayfogle.
Right.
Right. My Little Pony, after me, everybody's going to say, well, I prefer Andy Price. I get to define what they all look like. I get to define how everybody looks. I don't have to draw the penny in the Batcave just exactly the same way as 500 other guys did it. So for him, it boiled down to exactly that. Was I want to create the sandbox that other people then judge other people against me. And I'm like, all right, that's fair.
That's an interesting take. It
was a surprise, but it was fair. So I imagine you probably don't have a lot of time right now, but do you do commissions? Do you take commission?
I do. I want to at the very moment, I'm not, just because I'm finishing the last book. After that, absolutely. Yeah.
I will be in touch. As soon as issue number 6 gets solicited, I will be in touch.
Yeah. And really it's a great ride right to the end. I know this is my thing, but I'm tuning Fred's horn right now. It really is, I fell in love with these characters while I was doing this, where at the end, even when I don't want to give away anything as to what happens to them, but you're like, oh man, I gotta do this justice. That's how I felt, like I really had to make the most out of this. It wasn't just a, shake and bake page that I threw out there for any of these.
Alan, I will be the first to tell you, Alan will not mind spoilers. He lives for spoilers. He begs for spoilers.
Well, I know, but Fred will probably kill me with the spoilers.
I promise you, Fred will never hear from me to tell him what you said.
but yeah, big secret. The Romans mostly die. Yes.
Really
Yeah.
interesting.
It's a shocker. It
Yeah.
does happen though. But yeah.
Wow, that I hear the Titanic ended up sinking.
Yeah. Spoiler alert: Obi-Wan dies. So for those of y'all that are wanting to check out Nick's art, y'all can go check him out over on Instagram. He does have art from Dead Romans up. Y'all can check some of that stuff out, and he also has other art on there that y'all can check out.
I will say some of the stuff I saw on your DeviantArt page, it looks like you might do some kind of fantasy stuff too, or was I just imagining that?
Man, I'll do anything really. You know, it's funny, when I got started, I got labeled as like a horror artist. I mean, and I love horror. I genuinely do, but I never considered myself just in that niche. You know, I was always up for doing. I always kind of like wanted to try a little bit of everything. You know,
and now you're doing a romance comic.
Now I'm doing exactly.
It's a big love story. It just happens to be in the middle of a terrifying, horrible battle.
Mm-hmm.
You have a Eddie Van Halen that you've done on your Instagram page that is just flipping beautiful. I love that thing.
Thanks, man. You know, I did that the night when I heard of his passing, you know, and I was just like, oh, crazy. And it was one of those things where it's not like I listen to Van Halen daily,
Yeah.
you know, but it was something from your youth that you're like, you know, when it happens and it hits you in a way you weren't expecting, you know, and I just, and a buddy of mine was a big fan, and I did that like really quickly, and it's on his wall now, you know, and
but you know,
if you like rock and roll and you like horror, then Alan is your best bud, man.
There you go.
That's right up Alan's alley there.
But you know, you kind of hit the nail on the head there for a second ago. From your youth, I mean, I'm looking at it right now, and anybody can look at that and automatically know from a distance that's Eddie Van Halen. The pose, everything. I mean, it's just perfect. I mean, honestly, that's a great tribute to him that you did when you found out he passed.
Nice. Thank you. It's you know, it's your way. When you're an artist, it's your way to say, hey, you know, you guys meant something to me. And,
yeah, Bill Sienkiewicz does that for everybody that anybody that passes that he liked, admired, what have you. He'll do a tribute like that, and it's always interesting to see.
It is, and I know exactly what you mean. It's kind of funny how sometimes when he does a portrait, and of someone living, and people are like, "Oh my God, did that person die?" You know,
I've done that.
I've done that too.
I see he posts something, and I jump over to CNN or wherever real quick to like check the news. Like, is this person gone?
I did the same. But yeah, I mean, he was a huge influence on me. You know, as a kid, I remember the first time. In all honesty, the first time I saw like New Mutants, you know, I thought it was kind of weird. You know,
right? I didn't track it. I didn't get it. When I was a kid, I just didn't understand New Mutants, what he was doing at all. It was weird, right?
Yeah.
As I've grown up, though, right, I look at it and I'm like, holy crap, that was incredible.
Yeah.
It's just amazing. I tell you, we had Jim Shooter down here at our local convention, and I was talking to him about Bill Sienkiewicz, and he said, I got to tell you, the man's a genius. He's an absolute genius. He said that, he goes, now, he's not always practical. I'm like, okay, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
And he goes, well, he brought into the office this thing of a Warlock from New Mutants, right? He said it was like 6 feet tall, and it was all kinds of stuff. It was paint, and it was stuff that he had, we would call it mixed media, right? It's stuff that he had just glued on there. And all kinds of stuff. He said it was one of the coolest things I ever saw, but I have no way of translating that into a comic book.
You know, Josh, you can't see that. Bill? I have that poster on my wall right there. I know exactly.
Oh, I can't see it. Do you really?
I don't know if I can. Do you see that?
Dude, yes. Yep. That's awesome.
Because I love that. You know.
But yeah, he goes. I was like, what am I love this, but what can I do with it, Bill? This is crazy. It's fantastic stuff.
I actually love. I've been checking out his YouTube channel. It's like Bill Sienkiewicz art,
Yep.
where he gives you the stories from back in the day. I love that, man. I love hearing that.
Is that not some of your favorite things in the world? I live for that.
It is, man. It puts a smile on my face, and like what an era of creativity, and I wonder if he realizes just how many people he inspired.
Oh, for sure.
For sure he must,
Yeah, he can't be totally oblivious to it. But I gotta say, I was in Chicago in 2005, 2006, and I'm walking down through Artist Alley, and I look over, and there's Bill Sienkiewicz, and he's just sitting there, and there's nobody around. I'm like, what messed up world is this? So I walked over to him and I started talking to him, and I'm like, look, I own a small comic shop. I'd love to get something from you. And he's like, well, you got a pad of paper? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And I hand it to him. And so he just starts talking to me and doing like this while he's talking to me. He never looks at the paper.
Yeah.
Never lifted the pen off of the paper.
Yeah.
And I'm not positive to this day whether he drew the Hulk or a gorilla. I think it's the Hulk. It's amazing, whatever it is. But he drew it without even looking at it.
Yeah.
And talking to me. And the pen never left the paper. And I'm like, what kind of a sick genius is this? This is insane.
Yeah.
That kind of talent shouldn't be allowed. I couldn't draw this if I spent 4 months on it. And I was desperately trying to do this or I was going to be murdered. Here he is like, da, 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 da. Yeah. Incredible. Incredible. You talked about Mark Silvestri. I don't know. Do you have time to read comics anymore? Or are you just so swamped creating that you don't have time to read them?
Yeah, like usually when I'm in the midst of it, I don't read that often, but then I always pick up the trades after the fact, and I try to catch up as much as I can. But Silvestri was actually I've never had a chance to meet him in person. But he was a favorite of mine. I would say he was the last one that I really followed on X-Men.
Yeah.
There was something about his style with Dan Green and embellishing.
Yep.
I thought that creative team was I don't know, they just really clicked with me, man.
They were phenomenal.
To this day, I visualize those issues when I'm trying to do my own kind of embellishing, on my own work.
Yeah.
Now, not to say that Jim Lee was anything less. I mean, Jim Lee's Jim Lee, right? He's
phenomenal.
Phenomenal, exactly. It's just, it's your own personal preference.
Right. And for me, Mark Silvestri always had a little bit more of a looser style than Jim Lee.
Yes.
Every bit, Jim Lee is like super polished, right?
Yes.
And every line is pristine and detailed. And Mark Silvestri always had a little bit of a looser, a little more inky kind of a look, maybe, that I really liked. It just gave his stuff a dynamic kind of a feel.
Yes, absolutely. And
like Dale Keown's artwork used to do, right?
I'm
Dale
sorry?
Keown's artwork used to have that kind of dynamic feel to it.
Sorry, who did you say?
Dale Keown.
Yes.
His stuff used to have that feel to it. Anymore, his stuff kind of reminds me more of his later stuff now reminds me kind of Barry Kitson. Still very good, but it doesn't have that dynamic action. Like you can feel the guy breathing and he's about to say something or whatever.
Yes.
That Mark Silvestri had. And I'll tell you.
It's very organic. That's the word.
Organic. That's the word. Yeah. If you haven't had time to pick it up and read it now, I get it. You're busy. But when the dust settles and you have a chance, it should be through by then. Mark Silvestri is doing a Batman book for DC. It's Batman and the Joker Deadly Duo. It's a 7-issue limited series.
Yes.
Holy God, is it beautiful.
Jim mentioned that on his Facebook, and thank you for bringing that up because I want to pick that up too.
He is also the writer on that.
Yeah.
And I honestly didn't know what to expect from that. Like I don't know how I'm going to like the story. I know it's going to be beautiful, but how am I going to like the story? That's one of my favorite things I've read in a long time. It's fantastic.
Yeah, he introduces a new villain to it, and the way this villain treats Batman and the Joker, it's one of those where when I read it, I'm really hoping that somehow, some way, Zdarsky brings this villain to the main Batman run at some point, at least for some type of cameo or something. Because
you guys have me intrigued.
Written is smart.
Sorry.
The villain that he's written is smart. I mean, he's not just. He's very methodical. He has a plan. On some level, it will even kind of remind you of Jigsaw from the Saw movies. The whole "Do you want to play a game?" It's you'd have to read it. I mean, it is a great read.
Yeah,
it's
no,
fantastic. And if you're a Silvestri fan, just watching him draw Batman,
yeah.
And he includes Nightwing and Catwoman and Tim Drake, and he includes all these characters, so you get to see his take on them. But he's got one particular shot of the Batcave from way up here looking down that is so cool. And
right on, man.
He hasn't lost any of that organic feel to his art. It's all still there, and it's absolutely gorgeous.
You know, because I always wondered like how much of that was him versus Dan Green.
That's a good question because it's hard to tell in a printed book, right?
It is. I remember I started off as actually an inker and a colorist, and I remember the mantra back then is like, what the audience sees is the inker. Like the penciler is important, obviously, but what the audience sees is the inker. And it really made me appreciate guys like Dan Green, Tom Palmer, Buscema,
Norm Ratman.
Yeah.
He's phenomenal.
I wonder today, because it's all digital now, it's this art that I think a lot of people don't appreciate anymore, that we all kind of grew up with, just the art of inking itself,
Inking is incredibly difficult. I watch guys who do it, and they whip out that little brush. Like, what do you mean you're using a brush? This is insane. And like, well, I can do this, and I get a deeper line here, but a light line there, all in one motion. I'm like, okay, how gutsy are you to use that's insane. The things that you do in inking that add the line depth and all that kind of stuff is just an absolute mystery to me. I don't get it. Conceptually, I get it, but I can't translate that to any skill with my hands. And I'm like, hats off to anybody who can do it. It's a heck of a skill.
And it is really like once you're, we all start off using like a number 1 brush. Then when you're good, you're using like a number 4 brush, where you have such a range of line weight. At this point in my time, it's been years since I've actually inked with a brush. I've just been on the tablet like nonstop for years now. I'd like to get back into it, because I remember loving it. And there was something about getting your hands dirty, which I don't do anymore, but I miss it.
Well, I'll tell you what, when you're done with this, and I was not joking, I want to reach out to you about getting a commission done. I have people get on to me all the time of like, why do you have all this comic book art up around the walls at the store if you're not going to sell it? I'm like, because I love it.
Yeah.
That's why. No, it's not for sale. Yes, it is on the wall. You're just going to have to get over it. It's there because I love it. And I love a good, solid black and white, maybe a little gray wash, whatever. I do appreciate gray wash tremendously. But I like a good, solid black and white where you can see the actual work of what happened here, what's going on here. I've got a picture from Mike Zeck that was inked by John Beatty.
Yeah.
And I almost don't I love it, but I almost don't like it because it's such a pristine, they work together like ham and eggs, right? It's such a pristine inking job that it looks like it came off a printer.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dang it, man. So I like that kind of organic flow.
I've got one last question for you, and it actually circles back to something that Fred said earlier. And, it's one of those stupid little things that when it gets stuck in my mind, it's going to drive me nuts until I know the answer to it.
Uh-oh.
How do you give a soft no?
I'm sorry?
I've never in my life been given a soft no.
You have. You just didn't realize it.
Yeah. How do you get the soft no? Because all the ones I've ever heard have definitely been a hard no.
I'm going to go out on a limb and guess it's partially because they're Canadian and they actually are polite.
You know, yeah, you don't want to be, rude, and and I'm very non-confrontational. I'm kind of wishy-washy like that. So, I'll get to it. Let me think about it. That's my soft no. I'll think about it, and then I just avoid a person. But now, what is funny with Fred? He posted this thing on his Facebook. It was, do you remember there's this one site that used to do these like lip syncing things with
Yes.
they did this one with Empire Strikes Back.
Yep.
With like Luke, and it was called like Seagulls or something like that. He posted this, but he put a comment with it saying, "This is the greatest thing I've ever seen," And my daughter at the time laughed so hard at that I was just like, so I used to play. I'm like, I got to give this guy some props, and almost because of my little girl laughing at him, I heard him out, and here we are.
That's awesome. That's such a great story.
Yeah, somebody in the comments earlier had posted that he Facebook stalked his commission, which I thought was funny.
That's kind of what he did, yeah. So I started looking this Nick guy up, and I'm like, yeah, I want this guy to do my book. So yeah, he did Facebook stalk you a little bit from the sound of it.
Because I'm terrible with my self-promotion. Guys, I'm brutal. I kind of came around before social media became the thing. So I was always like, that's not going to be a thing. I don't need to learn how to use that effectively. And then all of a sudden, all the kids are like coming ahead of you, and you're like, oh, maybe there's something to this, when everyone else like forgets who you are. And, these young punks are upstaging you, Honestly, that's how I felt for a while.
Oh, that's totally legit. I get that. You must be older than you look. I will say that. Just given the comics you were reading and the era that you were reading them, and then this get off my lawn attitude about the social media and stuff. You must be older than you look.
How old do you think I am?
Well, I don't know now.
No, I'm not. It's not a secret or anything.
I mean, based on what you said, I'm going to say you're close to 45.
Very close. I'm 47.
See, I'm 49, so.
And I just turned 48. So yeah, all right, because
we're all the same era.
Yeah,
right?
We know our own.
But you look much younger than we do. So I don't know what you're doing up there. What kind of water you're drinking? But congratulations.
Lake Ontario water.
Because I would have, if you hadn't started saying some of the things you were saying, I would have thought, early 30s, this guy. So God dang it, I'm jealous. But I do have a question, and I'm sure it's one you get asked fairly often, but we've got some phenomenal artists at my comic shop. We got some guys who are really great that are wanting to get into this and do what you're doing. What would you tell somebody who is wanting to say, I've got my skill, I have these things, I'm putting in this work. How do I translate that into doing this for a living? What would you tell somebody about how to get kind of from A to B?
Yeah, good question, man. And the big difference is from when I started is it's now there's this whole new game with social media. That was not a thing when we were like when I got started. You would literally, like I said when I was talking to Alan earlier, like you go to a convention, you just like literally try to network, you meet people. A lot of people brush you off. I got lucky where someone actually gave me the time of day and showed my pages to an editor. And, interestingly enough, because of that, I always felt like that need to pass it forward, So whenever I would be at a convention, if a young artist came up to me, I'd be like, yeah, man. Like, and if I thought legitimately that they had promise, I would recommend them. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of times where that didn't go anywhere. Like people just aren't able to deliver, and you look like an idiot. And you start to realize this is why people are so cynical when you meet them at conventions, because if you don't know the person and you don't know that they can deliver, often they won't, and why if someone just comes up to you who you don't know, who has no credentials, like it's hard to just like give them the time of day because you get screwed. I've been screwed, but at the same time, I wouldn't be here if I didn't get that shot from someone, so you're just kind of playing that field. But companies like Image are actually amazing for creator owned stuff, and I would say if you're trying to get noticed, that's the route you got to go, man. Like, and don't look to hook up with an established writer because they're going to brush you off, because I would if I was them. Try to go with someone at your own level and try to work some magic, like do the best that you can do, the best that they can do, and do the old fashioned route. That's what I did, send your stuff out. People are reading it, and that's actual part of the game of learning how to pitch properly, that's actually part of it. And like, just look for the feedback and follow the feedback, target your pitches. Don't just send the same kind of pitch to Image that you would to a company like Top Shelf or Drawn and Quarterly. People are looking for their stuff, like understand the business you're trying to get into. If you want to do like indie or more character driven comics at like a company like Drawn and Quarterly or Top Shelf, look at what they're producing. Because I'll tell you, the publishers reading your submissions, they're not, I think the worst thing to do is submit something that they would never in their lives publish, because it just like,
automatic
why are you wasting
turn
my
off.
time, kid?
Learn
Learn how to
send your heavy metal pages.
exactly, like learn how to pitch. That really is a skill, man. Like I learned it the hard way, because all the things I'm saying are the things that I fucked up on, because even after I first got published, like I don't think I knew much. It was kind of part of it was luck, and then when you're trying to do your own thing and you think, oh, well, I got enough cred. No, I didn't. Believe me, I did not. I thought I did. I didn't, and you're almost like right back to the beginning.
Well, I appreciate that. I know we've got guys.
Sorry, did I even answer anything, or was I?
No,
Just
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
That was actually some great advice.
It really was.
Okay, so when you can shut me up and I start intently listening, you're doing great. That was good.
That's true.
I'm like, damn, he is going somewhere now. Keep going. I'm leaving.
Sometimes I have it all in my head, and I'm like, am I articulating it properly, or am I just like sounding like a douchebag? I don't know.
No, not at all. It's everybody's kind of got a different path of how they got into this industry, and the one thing that they have in common is they're really passionate about it and they really want to get to it. Yeah, this is one of the guys who's a fantastic artist. That he's an up and coming young man, and so that's the kind of thing that's really helpful to him. We've got several others up at the shop who are great artists, and it's just a matter of figuring out how to translate that skill into doing what they want to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, any kind of advice, like anything else, right? If you have one path and somebody else has a different path into it, and they might say, well, that from this guy's path, I think I might be able to do that advice, and this advice from this guy, I may be able to do, and they'll find their own way. But all those data points help them figure out the way to approach it, right?
Because I like another example, I did this book called Kink, which was an indie book, and it actually did really well for an indie book.
Yes, it
did. Showing that to, I'm not going to name any names, showing that to some people at DC, like they couldn't have cared less about it, and even though that book sold extremely well for an indie novel, just goes to show you, like, it's like target your pitch, like if you're looking to get into this type with this company, show them what they're looking for. Because believe me, like, I think we all have this idealized image that, well, I know how to produce and I know how to produce well, and I did this, but if that's not what they're looking for, they really don't give a fuck. Don't waste your time. That's the way it is. You know, an interesting thing is, the older I got, is you start to appreciate the work of anyone who's been doing it for a while. That when you're young and you're arrogant and you're like, oh, this sucks, I only like this type of shit, But as I'm at this point now, like I like everything, and you know, like because I start to appreciate the work that went into it.
Yep.
You know, and I have such a range of interests, and you know what? It all has value. Believe me, guys, it all has value. If you have an idea and you want to make it work, you know, just stick it through. You know, it's going to be hard. Don't let anyone tell you like it's going to fucking be easy. But if have realistic expectations, work on your craft, and you know it'll happen if you stick to it. I'm a big believer in that. Like I never believe that you just can't make it work. You know, because if you have realistic expectation and you can criticize yourself, you can improve.
And you
I
can
mean,
accept
maybe I'm being
criticism
too
from other
idealized,
people.
but I like to believe that. You know.
Oh, absolutely. I agree. And I think that's great advice for any up and coming person in the business here. So appreciate that. And really appreciate you taking the time. You've been hanging out with us for a good long time, and I certainly appreciate it. I got to tell you, we are very excited about Dead Romans. We want to sell a heck of a lot of it. We want all the stores to sell it. So I know we've got guys who watch from Texas, from Nebraska, all over. Go to your LCS, pick up Dead Romans, read number 1. You're going to want to come back for number 2, and you got to come back for the whole run so we get that second arc, because otherwise Alan's never going to be happy for the rest of his life. He's going to stalk Fred and pester him to like, tell me what you were going to do in the second arc. Don't make Alan do that, guys.
Now, did I or did I not text you earlier today and promise you that I will end up in a comic book before this is over with?
You did. And Nick just promised that he would draw you dying horribly in Dead Romans. I think I heard that somewhere in there. No, it was a soft no he gave you. It was a soft no. That's what that was.
Yeah. If I get impaled, please make it straight through. I don't want it to go straight up.
He doesn't. He wants to die with some dignity, I think is what he said.
Leave me a little bit of dignity.
Remember, as a German, you would be al fresco, as they say. You know.
Well, I don't want to be al fresco.
You might not have a choice. You didn't when you first initially laid this idea out. You just got to go with what you get now.
Look, I just want to be fresco. We can leave Al out of it, okay?
Oh, Lord have mercy. Well, is there any last thing you want to tell folks about where they can find you in your art, where they can, what they need to be looking for in Dead Romans? Anything else you want to share with folks before we let you get out of here, because you've been hanging out with us forever?
Oh God, no, and I appreciate, guys. It's really fun talking. Sometimes I wonder if anyone cares about anything I have to say. Thank you. If you want to find me on social media, Facebook and Instagram, Nick.Marinkovich. I don't know how many other Nick Marinkoviches there are. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one, especially with Dead Romans art attached to it. I do have a DeviantArt page. I never check it, but it does exist. But
I enjoyed scrolling through it. I'll tell you that.
Well, thank you. You know, I should check it more often. I didn't know that anyone does. Again, I am not the most, you know, knowledgeable social media guy, but Instagram and Facebook I do check daily. So if you want to get in touch with me that way, by all means. And
y'all have to wait until after I get my commission before y'all hit him up. Okay,
right.
That's just one of the rules.
DM me or email me. You know my email as well. And guys, stick with Dead Romans. Honestly, it is a crescendo to the end. And you know, if Fred can make me love these characters, he'll make you love them as well. And it's a hell of an ending. You know, it all works out, man.
I can't wait. I've got some historical knowledge of this battle, right? So I'm really curious to see how the story you tell unfolds within the context of that. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm really worried about everybody. I'm going into this thinking, okay, Wash has already died. Are they going to kill the rest of the cast of Firefly? What's happening? Spoiler alert, Wash dies.
Yeah.
Hey, Josh, just to let you know, the Romans die in this.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm concerned about this story. I'm really concerned right out of the gate about every character we meet. Like, is this one going to make it? Probably not. So, yeah, no, I come into this already like nervous for people, and that produces anxiety. But no, guys, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate that. Pass that along to Fred too, if you would. We're really, really grateful for that, and we're excited for this book, and we want to make sure that people read it because we love it, and we want to be able to talk about it.
Thanks, guys.
At the shop on Wednesdays.
Oh, that's awesome, guys, and thanks for having us. It's like we're like little kids doing this book, and that anyone shows interest in it, makes us feel good.
Well, if you're writing a story, they say write a story that you want to read. Well, I want to read this story, and so I'm glad that I don't have to write it because I couldn't do that very well. So I'm excited to see how it unfolds. Really appreciate that. Everybody, we're going to go ahead and sign off now. Next week, you've got to come out. We have Jim Valentino, co-founder of Image and publisher of Dead Romans, is going to be on the show. So that's going to be a huge week for us. We're excited about that. And I'm going to play us out with a little video from, I told you, we used to do a trivia show. And we got a little video that if you're an 80s kid like we are, this will remind you, I think, of Spy Hunter. So here you go. Check this out.